If anybody needs clarification about anything I say, don't be afraid to raise your hand. But if you have questions or comments, please save them for the end. I don't want to derail what we're doing here, all right? I'm Greg Luderman. I'm a furry sci-fi author. I've published 5 novels. I've edited an anthology. Published a bunch of short stories. I've got the only book that's ever won all 3 of the fandom's literary awards, the Ursa Major, the Leo Literary, and the Coyote. I go to a lot of furry cons, and I give talks on how to write a great story, and I thought it'd be fun to change things up a bit. And instead, we're going to talk about how to write a terrible story. All right? Now, that's easy. I don't actually want you to write a terrible story, but I'd like to go over the things that are going to make your story terrible so that you can avoid them. All right? Yeah, that's pretty much what I got. What I'm hoping is that if we go over what's going to wreck your story, that the next time you're about to make one of these terrible mistakes, you're going to stop and you're going to go, hey, I went to this great con, and some dude in a hat said not to do this exact thing. And then maybe you'll hit that big old backspace button and do it differently, okay? All right, let's start with the most common problem that we see in furry fiction, all right? And I do mean most common, like if you were to grab 10 furry stories at random, I would bet you that at least 5 of them make this exact same mistake, all right? Hands up, who knows what that is? What is that most common mistake we see in furry fiction?
Not any clear which characters, which species?
No.
Character description.
No.
I was going to say world building.
I'm just going to give you the answer. I'm sorry, my mask is not going to stay.
You don't leave it on
As a speaker,
the most common problem is starting your story in the wrong place. All right? I'm going to give you a little example here, and I want to know who can tell me what is wrong with this opening. All right? The city of Portsmouth was divided into 4 quadrants. One for the laborers, one for the merchants, one for the bankers, and one for the ruling class. Each quadrant was divided by stone walls and a huge gate. Though the gates usually stood open, each was guarded by the king's men. What's wrong with this opening?
The opening is, it's basically info dump on
Info
instead
dump?
of introducing the character.
What else you got?
There are no characters.
There's no characters.
it's boring.
It's boring.
Sounds like a textbook.
This is a great way to start a terrible story. This looks like history, and people hate history.
I beg to differ with
But the problem is more than that. All right? This is, I thought of a really cool setting for my story, and I want to describe it so that you can be immersed in it. And that's not a bad thing. Readers love being immersed in your story. They love good descriptions. But is this where you start a story? No. No. You should never, ever, ever start a story by describing anything. All right? Unless you want your story to be terrible. Do you need clarification? Then hold it.
Clarification specifically on starting with a place, but what about starting with dialogue?
We're going to keep going. Let me keep going.
Sorry.
All right. How about this one? Here's another opening. Tell me what's wrong with this one. I'm so glad you could make it, the vampire queen told me. Armed gunmen have boarded a school bus full of children and taken them hostage. Gets better. Normally, the coven wouldn't get involved in human business. But several of the hostages are children from the local werewolf clan. If these children are harmed, it could destabilize our relationship. with the clown. What's wrong with this opening?
Again, it's character info dumping, and it's a whole like show don't tell sort of motif.
There we go, one more.
That sounds way too close to the peak of the story.
I'm not sure about that, but let me go over it here.
Jumps around too much.
This is another great way to start a terrible story. The author is still introducing, but instead of introducing the setting, they've started by introducing the situation, introducing the plot. I can't even tell you, I'm sorry, I'm going to try to stay back here because this is not going to stay up. I can't even tell you how many stories do this. But is this terrible story telling the reader? The author is saying something really fun and exciting just happened, but you don't get to see it. Instead, here's two characters talking about it. No. 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 Instead of introducing it, from now on, I'd like you to jump right into the story. All right? Find the first exciting thing that happens in your story and start there. Even if that means you have to make something up. All right? Bear with me here. All right?
Later, how do you make something up?
And don't worry about if something happens before that. Something always happens before that. And if that something that happens before it is so important, we can always flash back to it later. All right? Why is this so crucial? Obvious, right? Tell me.
Yeah, it gets the audience immediately interested in the story and the characters.
Very, very
It's also
close.
very exciting.
Anybody else? We're really close here. I'll tell you. Because on average, you have about 500 words to grab the reader's attention. That's it. 500 words. And 500 words is not a lot of text. It's about 2 full paperback pages. That's it. If you don't capture the reader's attention in those first 500 words, if you don't intrigue them enough to make them wonder what's going to happen next, they're going to put your book back on the shelf. They're not going to buy it. All right? So, what happens in your first 500 words? Think about it. Did you waste them by describing the setting? Did you waste them by having people talk? I shot my character. What goes on in the first 500 of a great story? It needs to be something exciting or something that sparks the reader's curiosity. And you may not believe this, but it doesn't even need to be directly connected to your main plot. All right? It should, however, be an event that draws us into your world and what is wrong with it. All right. For example, the first book I got published is about life on a generation ship, where nobody's allowed to live past 60. And that's not the plot. That's just the setting. All right? So I started out with a funeral. Guy turns 60 and he commits suicide as is expected of him. All right? And then his body is carried off, and the narration follows the body until it crosses paths with the main character. And then you get to see the main character's life aboard the ship. And in other words, the main character barely even appears in chapter 1. Chapter 1 is about a guy who dies and we never see him again. But it's interesting and it's intriguing and it pulls the reader in to want to know more. And gets them past that 500 word mark where they're most likely to put the book down. All right. Maybe skip a page. All right. Perhaps your story is about a fantasy world where where criminals are transformed into animals as punishment. Not necessarily. And your main character pisses off some powerful guy by rejecting his advances. All right? And to get his revenge, he frames your main character so she'll be turned into an animal. All right? Where would you start? What would go in your first 500 words?
I'd have the trial. where it's like a kangaroo court.
There we go, a mock trial. This is exactly what I'm looking for, so I'm going to stop right here. A great place to start might be a totally different criminal. We want to show an example of how awful this is. Despite how much we might like to be turned into an animal, maybe there's a thief and he gets turned into a horse and has now got to spend the rest of his life plowing fields. That doesn't sound so fun. That kind of sucks. But it would be interesting and it would draw us into this. All right? Maybe your story is about a world where it's taboo for humans and furries to fall in love. All right? And your story is about a main character that goes from being a pet to a friend to a lover to a mate. All right? What do we put in the first 500? Someone. You're thinking about it. You.
Sets off as lone person, bummed life, stuff sucks. Later on in the chapter, we introduce the character. Something explodes in a way that makes it sound like.
Anybody else?
I don't know. I lost.
That's fine. You do it.
You look at another relationship that's falling apart due to someone's disagreement. Maybe it's at a restaurant where you have a group of people mocking another human and furry relationship.
Perhaps. You and Matt.
I was thinking that to a much greater extreme, like a whole on like societal damnation of a couple, and like put a lot of like emotional manipulation within said.
How about a mob scene?
That's what I was thinking. Yes.
Right? Pitchforks and torches. Exactly. This is the kind of thing that would make us go, oh crap, this isn't right. But it would pull us in and we'd want to know what happens next. One last crucial thing that I want to say about your first 500. Don't feel obligated to write your first chapter first. I know, it's crazy, right? But go ahead and start with chapter 2, because you may not even realize when you've started just what it is that needs to be introduced. Well, not introduced, but I use the word introduced. The thing that we need to show is broken in the world. We may not even realize that until we are near the end of the story. Go start with chapter 2, right to the end, then go back and write chapter 1. All right? And this is why I don't write serials anymore. Because, you're publishing as you go. You don't get a chance to go back. But if you do this right, if you start with chapter 2, you go to the end, you go back to chapter 1, and then you edit it, no one will even realize that this was written out of order. They'll just think that you're some sort of genius when they realize these seemingly unrelated events in chapter 1 do actually connect to what happens in the rest of the story. I need a little tequila. I mean, tea.
Nothing wrong with that.
Ooh.
Long Island.
Tequila Mockingbird.
To write a terrible story, we need to steer clear of those things that make stories great. All right? We need to know the destination of the great writer so that we can go the opposite way. And I know a bunch of you guys have already done this talk before, so you already know the answer. Keep your hands. I want to hear everybody else. All right? So, what does the great writer want to accomplish? What is the goal of the great furry writer?
Yeah,
Do it.
I'll take
Make a book people enjoy, make a book people buy.
Make characters that people will enjoy, maybe
Make
relate to them.
characters people enjoy. Getting close, one more.
Write a story that's relatable to somebody.
Something relatable. I'm just gonna tell you. I'm just gonna tell you. It's not world building. Alright. A great furry writer's goal is to keep the reader from putting the book down. That's it. No, I'm serious. That's it. Think about your favorite book. What's your favorite book? Think about the first time that you read your favorite book. Was this a book that you kept in your kitchen and you read a few pages every time you were boiling water? Or was this one of those books that kept you up until 2 o'clock in the morning, even though you had to go to work or school the next day, and you're looking at the clock and going, oh, gotta get some sleep.
And then you read
But
the
I've
page.
gotta get to the end of this chapter.
Okay.
Right? And then you get to the end of the chapter and you're like, ah, what's next?
One more chapter.
That's our goal, because those are the stories that we love. That's what we want to produce. We want to be the memorable story that people recommend to their friends, that people are waiting, counting down the days for the sequel to come out. Right? All right, so take a moment to think about your favorite books. All right, what 2 things do they all have in common? All right, don't say dragons. They don't all have dragons. Seriously. What 2 things do all of your favorite books have in common? It's very important that we know what these 2 things are, so that we don't accidentally put them in our terrible story. Hands up. Who knows what 2 favorite things are our favorite stories?
Well, in my favorite stories, I like the ones with a good hook at the beginning, something that really pulls me in, and I'll do something.
Great characters and a unified plot.
Great characters is really big.
A sense of mystery, something you want to dig deeper to get the answers for.
I'm gonna tell you. You guys are close. All right? You guys are very close, but let me tell you what it is. All right? Number 1, these favorite books of ours are immersive.
Yes.
All right? We start reading a great story and we forget that we are reading. We're not looking at squiggles of black ink on white paper. We're not seeing words and paragraphs and chapters. We're there. We're either watching the main character or we are the main character. We're immersed in the story. Right? Number 2, we're worried about the main character. All right? There's something weird about the way that our brains are wired, that when we're worried about the main character, we don't want to pause what we're doing and make time for eating and sleeping and personal hygiene and stuff. We want to keep reading. We want to know that everything is going to be okay.
So that's why I like that stuff.
All right. When a book is really great, when it's immersive and it makes us worry about the main character, we'll let that book ruin our lives. That's the great writer's goal.
I love it.
Not us, of course, since we want to write terrible stories. But if we wanted to write a great one, then we'd absolutely want our story to be both immersive and make us worry about the main character. So we're going to start with immersive. What makes a story immersive? What makes us forget that we're even reading at all? Immersive stories do 3 things. They're about, you were first.
good word choice and flow of sentences and words and formatting, I think.
Maybe.
Good descriptions of settings.
Good descriptions of settings.
Show, don't tell.
Show, don't tell. I'm gonna tell. All right. Number one, they're about a main character that we love. Number two, they're told using a point of view. And number three, they don't do any stupid shit that draws us out of the moment. All right? These three things are huge, and possibly the three biggest things in a great story, so we definitely want to avoid them. A great story will have one main character. Sometimes there's a secondary character that's almost as important as the main character, but even in stories like that, stories where we're jumping back and forth between two threads, the reader still knows who that main character is. Terrible stories muddy this around. They might have a bunch of characters, or maybe the author is trying to avoid playing favorites, so we don't really connect with who that main character is. In great stories, we love the main character right from the start. The main character doesn't have to grow on us, all right? They're a genuinely likable person. Terrible stories might have a prickly main character. Having a, not me. Terrible stories might have a prickly main character. Having a prickly main character will almost guarantee that you are writing a terrible story. Because people care about it. First impressions matter. All right? If your main character is being a jerk the first time we meet them, then readers probably won't give them a second chance. Now, it is possible to write a likable jerk. All right? Deadpool, for instance. He's a likable jerk. We like him. All right? And he's definitely a jerk. But he tends to be jerky to people who are worse than him. So it's very cathartic for him to be jerky. All right? Another great example of the likable jerk, Nick Wilde. He's the likable jerk. But he's not the main character Judy Hopps is. We fall in love with Judy Hopps, so we stick around, and that gives Nick time to stop being such a jerk so that we'll really like him by the end. All right. Gives him time to reform. Also note, not everyone is good at writing the likable jerk. All right? The likable jerk is really advanced stuff. And if you're going to write a likable jerk story, you need to find a truly honest beta reader. Find someone who's going to tell you whether your story sucks. There's no harm in that. Have them tell you whether your story sucks. And then, if it turns out that the likable jerk is beyond where you are as a writer right now, that's okay. Go write more basic characters and come back to this later on when your skills are more honed. What's another great way to sabotage your main character? Oh, what's going to sabotage our main character?
No personality.
Oh, he's flat. You.
What we like to call a Mary Sue.
Mary Sue, there we go. What we're talking about is making them awesome. All right? If your main character starts out awesome, then it's unlikely that we're ever going to care about them. All right? I'm going to give you two characters, and I want you to imagine a scenario where each of these two characters is in danger. All right? Character number one is a baby bunny. Now, imagine for a moment that this baby bunny is in danger and she's going to need a whole bunch of luck to survive. All right? Character number 2 is genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist Tony Stark. Someone's trying to kill him. All right, still, you got it. Now, imagine that you told these 2 scenarios to a friend. Which of these 2 characters is he going to care about? Is it going to be the baby bunny that could die at any moment? Or is it going to be the guy who's had everything handed to him on a silver platter?
I think it's pretty popular.
I'm going to go with the baby bunny.
First.
Well, to be fair, in order to make toy label, you had to strip him down to baby bunny status.
True, yeah.
Now, that's not to say that you can't have a powerful main character. All right? But if you want the reader to worry about them, if you want the reader to not be able to put the book down, then try starting out with a character who's humble. All right? Go ahead and give them power over the course of the book. Maybe the bunny becomes a mighty wizard, right? And has to battle an evil weasel wizard. But if you want the reader cheering your character on, then it's best to start out with someone that we can identify with. Point of view. All right? Point of view is crucial for immersion. A great book tells each scene from a single character's point of view. Terrible books either narrate the scenes without a point of view, like you're watching a movie, you're seeing what's happening, but you're not hearing people's thoughts and emotions. Or they'll head hop and tell us what multiple characters are thinking and feeling. Yeah. Point of view seems to be very confusing for many furry writers, and I'll admit that when I was young, no one taught us about point of view, so don't feel bad about it. Now, to be clear, when I say scene, I mean that we start a new scene at the beginning of every chapter, or whenever we hit a scene break. That might be like a pound, 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 or horizontal line, or a little extra space, or a little divider graphic. All right, so a chapter might be a scene, or if there are scene breaks, there might be multiple scenes within a chapter. But no matter how a book's scenes are broken up, a great writer will, number 1, choose the narrator for each scene. Number 2, make sure that the first name mentioned in a scene is that narrator's name. Number 3, almost immediately show something invisible to that main character, to that narrator character, so that we can verify who the narrator is for this scene. All right? And we're going to go over an example here, so let's do a little practice. Suppose we want to start a scene where Alice stomps into Bob's office and she yells, "What the hell is going on here?" All right? But here's the challenge. We're going to do it twice. We're going to do it once where Alice is the point of view character and once where Bob will be. All right? Now remember, we want to name the point of view character first and show something invisible about them. All right? So let's start with Alice. Who wants to take a quick shot? It should just be like 3 sentences. You want to do it? Do it. You can, otherwise I'll do it.
Alice flung open the door and they were slamming it behind her. Her paws stomped on the ground as she slammed her hands down on the desk. Bob looked up at her, his face clearly nervous. But before he could say anything, she shouted,
What the hell's going on?
Exactly.
Very, very close. We could definitely feel, I don't know if you can all hear her from this because she didn't have the microphone, but we could definitely feel that we were written from Alice's point of view. She had a whole bunch of stuff showing it all just as if she was the camera, all right? The one thing we didn't get is we didn't get anything invisible. So I'm gonna just give you a little example to show what I'm talking about there, all right? Gritting her teeth, Alice shoved the door wide and stormed into Bob's office. What the hell is going on here, she shouted, all right? And I'm showing she's gritting her teeth. Bob can't see that, all right? But the reader does. And we're like, oh, she's gritting her, oh, this is the viewpoint character. You know in an instant that I'm showing you something invisible. I mentioned Alice's name, I'm showing her gritting her teeth. She must be the viewpoint character. There's no confusion. I don't need to explicitly tell it, but I've given enough information that we just hone in on it there. Right? Now, we can do it again from Bob's point of view. Let's say Bob is the viewpoint character, exact same scene. I want to give it a shot. Do it.
Bob drummed his fingers on his desk, the events of the day unfolding in his head. He thought about what his next plan was going to be. When the door swung open with a slam, ringing in his ears as his focus was shattered, Alice stormed towards her with her feet stomping on the ground, and with a gust of wind from the hands impacting the desk, splashing across his face. What the hell is going on here? She yelled at him.
Definitely more than 3 sentences, but still, totally nailed it. You definitely knew that it was Bob's point of view. There was definitely a sense of what's invisible, that you're in his mind, and no question we're talking about his thoughts. It's definitely Bob, and Alice is not the main character. All right, I'm not even going to read mine because I don't need it. All right. For mine, I did that he was golden, so that you could tell. All right, so that's all right. What if we wanted to write a terrible story? All right, how would we write this scene? We could either show both. You could show something invisible for Alice and something invisible for Bob, and then the reader is left kind of wondering who is the narrator in this damn scene. Or we could leave it sterile. We could just show it like a movie, just you watching the event, so that there is no narrator. Okay, now, of course, this all presumes that the author is writing in third person, and that's not the only option. So, what are 3 other great ways for the narration to wreck what could have been a great story? It's a little trickier. The narration wrecking the story. Giving information. I'm looking for more stuff like writing in present or future tense. Present and future tense narration? No, don't do that. That will give you a terrible story, all right? It will wreck the reader's immersion. Number 2, writing in second person. These are not video game instructions.
Or choose your own adventure.
Or choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
That'd be fine for choose your own adventure, but if you're gonna write a novel, if you're gonna write a short story, please don't write in second person. It will make your story terrible.
That's you, right?
Number 3, what's that? You walk into a room and you see, no, I don't care how much you're trying to make the reader the first person, the reader the viewpoint character. You don't tell the reader what to do. You say, I walked into the room and I saw these things. And that will make the reader, okay? Or be inconsistent, like switching between first and third person, or changing narrators in a first person story. That narration will wreck your story. Now, admittedly, there is one way to change narrators in a first person story. All right, but you have to commit to it fully. It works like this. First, each chapter has a single narrator. Typically, you switch between 2 narrators, so one gets even chapters, one gets pods. And second, you name each chapter according to the narrator. For example, chapter 1, Alice. I burst into Bob's office, but everything told from Alice's point of view. And then you get to chapter 2, Bob. I think it's very sloppy, but this is valid. And then I was getting tired of Alice's crap. We're telling it all from Bob's point of view. All right, that's valid. I don't like it, but it's valid. Now, I mentioned earlier that the third way to wreck the reader's immersion is with a category that I call stupid shit.
My favorite.
I brought along a non-exhaustive list with me. But I want to see if you guys can name some stupid shit that will wreck the reader's immersion. Alright, but let me go first because I want you to see what kinds of stupid shit I'm talking about. Alright? Talking about wrecking the reader's immersion. Number 1, terrible stories may make creative use of different fonts, boldface, symbols, capitalization, or spelling. Readers want your story to be creative, not how you present it. Don't use different fonts for different speakers. Don't put text in all capital letters to emphasize it. Don't put a bunch of O's in wow, show that the sound is being drawn out. Don't use bold. Don't use brackets to indicate internal monologue. Every time you break away from what we know is the standard formatting, you distract the reader, you pull them from their immersion, and they have to get back into your story. And every time you do that, there's a risk they won't come back.
It is all right to italicize in order to place
Italicize is part of standard.
Or give a person's internal dialogue.
Absolutely.
You know, gee, I wonder if he's on
Right,
the level.
right, that's my fault. That's totally in our standard form. All right, who wants to give me another stupid shit that can wreck your immersion? Stupid shit that can wreck the reader's immersion. Can you think of one? I'll go on. I got 9 of these. Yeah? You?
Introducing, having the character know something and then going off on a complete tangent talking about the whole history of that something.
Tangents and rambling. Not. Maybe that's an immersion thing. Could be.
Inconsistencies with characters or rules.
Inconsistency, yeah, okay, I can see that.
Excessive details.
Excessive details. Let me give you some more. Let's show you what I'm talking about. Number 2, terrible stories use footnotes. All right, so not too long back, I read a book that used a variety of French words for no apparent reason, and then there was footnotes to tell the readers what they meant. So like you're reading along footnotes, I go to the bottom of the page. All right? Foreign words are very distracting. Try to minimize how many you use, and if you do include any, try to explain what they mean in the context of the story, either in the narration or in the dialogue. You never, ever, ever make the reader jump down to the bottom of the page, nor to the end of the chapter, and you definitely don't put a glossary at the end of the book. Right, that's not helping. I'm looking at you, Dune.
Moby Dick. Yeah. Oh, God, yes, it will.
All right, number 3. Should I keep going or somebody have one burning in their brain?
Constantly jumping between points in time.
That would be kind of immersion wrecking, yeah. I didn't think of that one, but I like that one. I'm going to go with the same goes for foreign names. If your story is about aliens or people from another country, then it makes sense that they would have unfamiliar names. But if there's no good reason in the story why a character should have an exotic name, then you may be making your story terrible by using them. Even if you are, for example, very familiar with Japanese names, your reader might not be. All right? And readers often lose immersion when they read names that they don't find familiar. They get different names mixed up. They can't tell which names are boy names and which are girl names. They can't tell other fundamental things that we get from names in our native language, like, oh, this is a common name, or this is an old-fashioned name.
Connecting to that, to the whole foreign names thing, I recently read a
We're going to go off on a tangent here. Either you got something that you want to immerse us in.
Jaggy's First Conlang, a bunch of made-up names, a bunch of technobabble that makes no sense.
Yeah. All right. How about, yes? Oh yeah, Deus Ex Machina. I would say even more, that's too many. Does that wreck someone's immersion? I don't know. I think it's maybe a different story problem, but it's definitely a problem. How about number 4, thick accents? When we were kids, as old folks, when we were kids, we had to read Huckleberry Finn. And Jim would say things like, quote, "Say, who is you? War is you. Dog my cats. F, I didn't hear some Finn. Well, I know what I's gwin to do. I's gwin to set down here and listen tell. I hears it again."
Well, of course he is.
All right. This is not an easy bit of dialogue. I really had struggled to get through this, and if I had been immersed in the story, then trying to decipher this authentic Emancipation era gibberish would certainly have taken me out of the zone. Accents are a good way to differentiate characters, but minimize them. Don't make your main character have an accent like this. You? Yes, did you have something that's going to wreck our immersion?
Or more about the Huckleberry Finn statement. When it comes to Jim, that's more of diction, not so much of the accent.
Okay, diction, accent, anything that's going to be foreign enough that's going to pull you out of your immersion, you're going to have to work to read it. That's what I'm saying, to minimize.
Yeah. So my question is, when it comes to text kind of more like Huckleberry Finn, when it's more of a timepiece.
Absolutely. Back in the time, back in that era, it may not have been nearly as distracting, but you try to read it now, and it's a struggle.
Yeah, it's a struggle, but when it comes to that particular timepiece, when it was written,
absolutely.
How do you differentiate like how to still keep that same quality, but keep it modern? But if you're going back to that time, you still have to keep that same feel. It's like,
my point is that if you're going to have something really thick where the reader is going to come to a stop, that's cool. That may work, and it may be very important to your story, but minimize it, because every time this happens, it's going to pull the reader out of their immersion. And if you're going to have this happen 3 times in your book, that's fine. That's the reader is going to get through this. But if the main character is talking like this is going to be a lot of work. It's going to be very hard to get a reader that gets all the way to the end. Is what I want you to learn from this.
So it's okay, but sparing.
Yeah, you need to be very careful about making your main character, or any character that has lots of lines, that is anything other than very, very clean. The very, very common lines, make them as clean as you can, because that's gonna make the reader work. All right. Number 5, bad spelling and/or grammar. We all make spelling mistakes. We all make grammar mistakes, and even after a book has gone through multiple editors and proofreaders, it's still not going to be error-free. And each error, just like a thick accent or diction, is going to pull the reader out of their immersion. All right. Every time you hit an error, and you hit a few errors, that's okay. That's going to happen. But if they're all the time, people are going to give up initially. All right?
Or you use one consistently.
But why do I need to fix the spelling errors? Isn't that what an editor's for?
No, that is not what an that's what a proofreader is for.
Yes.
We can get into that in a bit. All right. Terrible stories have lots of errors in them. Number 6, this is a subtle one. All right. Similes outside of a narrator's point of view. All right. That book I was talking about with the footnotes, it had a great simile in it. All right, I'm going to read it to you. It said, the wolves ran like raindrops down a window pane. I love that. That's brilliant. I can totally see it. But it would work great if the narrator for that scene was human. But there was only wolves in that scene. So none of the characters in that scene, and certainly not the narrator for that scene, had ever seen a window. And they'd certainly never seen raindrops run down it. That's, despite it being great, is very sloppy. And when I was reading along, it pulled me out of my immersion, and I said, hang on a second. It certainly didn't keep me immersed. Now, this is hard stuff, all right? Rick Griffin and I have been writing a series of books about aliens who have never been to Earth, and they've never met anyone who has. And this makes it really challenging to describe things because it breaks the point of view if you compare things in the story to things we find on Earth. I can't, for example, say that the cleanser smelled like lemons. I can't say that the pudding had a peanutty flavor. And I can't describe slit pupils as cat's eyes, because whoever the narrator is for a given scene, I can be sure that they've never smelled a lemon, they've never tasted a peanut, and they have no idea what a cat is. Something quick?
Yeah, if you're going to do that, would you be sort of putting in a simile that would seem very foreign to the reader, but would seem quote-unquote familiar to the character? Like, it smelled like the fruit of a fizzle pop tree or whatever. You're like, that doesn't ring with me. But
no, it definitely takes some style and some finesse.
Yeah.
And I don't have a pat answer.
Okay.
You're definitely going to go through editors
Okay.
to fix stuff. Because,
Okay.
yeah, it's a real challenge. That's what I'm saying. That's a hard thing to do.
Okay.
All right, so I think we've covered enough about keeping the reader immersed. Now, what about making the reader worry about the main character? Worrying about the main character is crucial to keeping the reader from putting the book down. Great writers will make the reader worry with 3 steps. First, they hurt the main character.
Yes.
Then, they threaten to hurt the main character more. All right? And finally, whenever the danger is removed, more is applied before the end of the chapter. All right? A lot of new writers are afraid to hurt their characters. And you don't have to. I mean, if you want to write a terrible story, it's not really fair. You could write a good story where the main character is never in danger, he's got a great life, everything is good, nothing bad ever happens to him. You could write a good story, but it's not destined to be great. It's not destined to become someone's favorite story. It's not going to be the kind of story that they're going to tell all their friends about. All right? So I want you to hurt the main character.
Yeah, prove to the rigor.
Yeah! A great writer isn't afraid of hurting their characters. They hurt them and they hurt them badly. And perhaps it's physical pain or maybe it's emotional pain by killing off someone close to them. Maybe the author hurts them by taking away what they have, making them homeless or unemployed or alone. But whatever pain is inflicted on the main character, it needs to feel very real. This pain can't be a minor nuisance like stubbing your toe or missing the train. All right? To make the reader worry about the main character, we need this pain to prove that they're in very real danger.
You could miss the train if you're shot or something.
Now that the reader believes that the danger is real, a great author will threaten to hurt the character more, and this danger that we've set up gives teeth to the threat. This threat will then propel the character into action, essentially forcing him to go on some sort of quest to keep this bad thing, TM, from happening. Ideally, the writer should give the main character some sort of time limit. That's that ticking clock. So that the character can't dawdle, so they have to work quickly. Can we think of any examples from popular movies? How about all of them? We could name them out, but honestly, all of our favorite movies probably do this exact same thing. Probably all your favorite books do too. How about the Empire killing Luke Skywalker's family, wounding him emotionally, then they destroy Alderaan, proving that the threat is real. And then the rebels have to destroy the Death Star before it can get into position. That ticking clock. Otherwise, the rebel base is going to be destroyed too. Or how about Voldemort killing Harry Potter's parents, wounding him emotionally, and proving that the threat is real? And then Harry has to get the Sorcerer's Stone before Voldemort can, and it's that ticking clock. Or he'll be able to reincarnate and kill people.
Fun.
The third part of this writing task is that whenever the main character gets out of danger, we want to put it back into danger before the chapter ends. All right, this one's a little tricky, so I'm not going to ask you to volunteer. All right, instead, let's suppose that your main character is living in a cabin in the woods with his family, and a pipe bursts and the house starts to flood, threatening to ruin the house and the possessions, so the family have to scramble around and figure out how to shut off the water. Now, admittedly, this threat doesn't put the character in much physical danger, but once the water is shut off, whatever danger there was is now past. Don't end the chapter there. And oh, we got it off. End of chapter. No, don't do that. All right? Instead, now the family needs to get their water turned back on, so they have to repair the broken pipe with an acetylene torch. All right, and while repairing the pipe, the main character accidentally starts a fire. Now that we put the characters back in danger, now we can end the chapter. Got it? In the next chapter, the family will try to put this fire out. If they're not able to, now the new crisis is getting everybody out of the house so that nobody dies. Once everybody is out of the house, don't end the chapter there, the danger is past. All right? Instead, this is a great time for it to start to snow, and that blizzard they've been worried about to start to roll in, and now this newly homeless family has a lot more danger to worry about now in the chapter. Got it?
Clarification, so how immediate should the danger be?
Before you end the chapter. Well, it's got to be enough. It doesn't have to be danger, but it's got to be something that either intrigues the reader or makes the reader worry so that they don't go, okay, finally at the end of chapter 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll pick it up tomorrow. Yeah. We want them to keep going. We want them to go, oh, I know what happens next. That's the key. All right? Now, all of this, I don't know what time it is, but we're probably running low.
11:55.
All of this can be planned out in advance, and we can chain disasters to keep the main character in action. We do let him rest from time to time, but even when he's resting, he should still be in danger. Like in the original Terminator, when Sarah Connor gets a sexy night with Kyle Reese. For example. Alternately, we can chain quest goals. The characters have to accomplish B and then A, and then they can work on B, and then they can deal with C. Or better yet, they can combine disasters and goals. The character has problem A, so they have to do B to fix it, but doing B breaks C, and now they have to do D to fix C. The characters keep fixing stuff, but in the process they break even more important stuff, so they can't stop, they can't walk away. This is sort of like burning the house down when you try to repair a brick. Oh yeah, I'm running out of time. We're running out of time.
Ticking clock.
Ticking clock. Why does it matter where the chapter breaks are? You guys got
You wanna
this.
start the next chapter?
Because we want them to
interested.
keep reading. Because if the reader wants to do something else, like it's 2 o'clock in the morning and they want to sleep, they'll plan on reading to the end of the chapter so they can put the book down. The great writer doesn't want them to do that, so he'll make sure that the main character remains and at the end of every chapter. And admittedly, this seems like a dirty trick. And it is. But as much as you would think that the readers are going to hate this, they actually don't. They love it. They do. I do. You know, you're writing and you're like, I'm not too bad. But they love it. And then at the end of the book, let's do the end of the book. A great author will do 2 things. He'll give the main character an unexpected way to win and reward him with something that he needs. In a movie example, I'm thinking about How to Train Your Dragon. All right? Villagers want Hiccup to become a Viking by killing dragons, but instead he befriends the dragons. And at the end of the story, Hiccup mends the fractured relationship with his dad. He gets a girlfriend too, which is nice. But clearly the thing that's been making Hiccup unhappy is the relationship with his father, not that he's single. Right? And one thing that I'd like to point out is that if you make your main character miserable by taking something away, you should absolutely, positively not give him back whatever it is that you took away. At least it shouldn't be the quest goal. A great writer will give him something else. Can you think of a movie that does this wrong? My favorite example is The Wizard of Oz. Right? Dorothy has a crappy life in Kansas, so she decides to run away, and a tornado whisks her off to a magical land filled with fun and excitement. And so what does she get for completing the wizard's quest? She gets to go back to Kansas. As someone who has lived in Kansas, L. Frank Baum may have thought that this was a wonderful reward, but I don't think that I'm alone in finding it disappointing. Dorothy doesn't seem to grow. Her life doesn't seem to improve. She just ends up back where she started, and yeah, she's all happy about being home, and just wait until tomorrow when Miss Gulch returns to have Toto euthanized.
No!
She's back where she was.
Sequels though, man.
Actually, if you watch the
Now, this isn't to say that our main character can't regain what he's lost. Pretend for a moment that in an alternate version of How to Train Your Dragon, we hurt Hiccup by making him homeless, right? Hiccup is tired of Stoic's crap, and so he runs away and he has this grand adventure where he befriends dragons and he gets a girlfriend. So, in the end, we can have Hiccup shack up with Astrid, so he's no longer homeless. But the quest rewards are the dragon friendships and the girlfriend. It's not that he's got a place to live. This is a very different ending than letting him move back in with his dad. That's the sort of ending that we put in a terrible story. And it is 12 o'clock on the mark. At this point in my notes, I have just asked people what they think also makes shit terrible, and I'm sure we could do that all day, but I've run out of time, so I kind of timed it pretty well. Anyway, thank you all for coming. reading about good stories, if you like talking about how to make stories, come by my table. I'm going to be in the dealer's room. I'm up against the wall where you first come in. I love talking about this stuff, and even if there's a crowd, just come off to the side and we'll talk. I'll be here all weekend, and I love talking to people, so just come on by. All right? And buy a book.